All right, let's open the case file. The subject today, the modern job market. And honestly, it feels like a crime scene, one that's just riddled with contradictions and really confusing signals. Our mission here is to cut through all that noise and figure out what's actually going on.
So here's the central mystery. You look at the official data and it paints this picture of a pretty stable economy. But for so many of us, the reality on the ground just feels broken, precarious. It's this huge disconnect, and that's the paradox we're here to solve. Let's start the investigation.
Ghost jobs? Quiet firing? Job washing? I mean, the professional world is just a storm of these buzzwords and anxieties right now. And look, these aren't just empty phrases. They are the symptoms of a system that is under a ton of pressure. It feels like a constant barrage of new threats that every single worker is forced to navigate.
And that leads us to our first piece of hard evidence. This is a big one. For the first time in history, the unemployment rate for young men with a college degree is now exactly the same as for those without one. The advantage that higher education always promised? Well, for this group, it seems to have just vanished. This anomaly is the real starting point for our whole investigation.
So this brings up the first unavoidable question. Has a college degree basically become a worthless piece of paper?
And you have to remember, this isn't just some abstract statistic. You can see it reflected in the real disillusionment of recent grads. This quote, it's not just frustration, it's a direct challenge to that promise we were all told, that a degree is your guaranteed ticket to a better life.
You know, every student has to make this incredibly difficult calculation. The promise of earning more over your lifetime? It's still there, yeah. But it's totally overshadowed by the immediate and, let's be honest, crushing weight of student debt. And the hard truth is, the math on that return on investment just looks a little bit worse every single year.
But, okay, before we declare higher education totally obsolete, we have to look at this pivotal piece of counter-evidence, 72%.
So what is that number? It's the percentage of people with a bachelor's degree who are in the labor force. Now compare that to just 56% for high school graduates. So while the unemployment rates for men might be getting closer, having a degree still makes you way more likely to be in the game at all, either working or actively looking for work.
This whole situation reveals a historical pattern. There's this old saying that's kind of like a canary in a coal mine. If you want to find an industry that's about to hit a downturn, just look at where all the Ivy League grads are going. From oil and gas in the 80s to big tech today, the top graduates always chase the boom. The problem? Well, no industry booms forever. The chaos we're seeing in tech right now, it's just the latest chapter in a very long story.
The fallout from these boom and bust cycles creates this chilling effect across the entire market. And that brings us to our next clue. So, if industry volatility is one piece of the puzzle, a market-wide freeze is another. We've got to figure out why everything just feels so stuck. And there's a term for this, job hugging. For years, the key to getting a higher salary was job hopping. But in the last year or so, that advantage has completely vanished. The new strategy is to just stay put, avoid any risk, and do absolutely nothing that could land you on a layoff list. And this isn't people being irrational. It's a totally logical chain reaction. It starts with widespread economic uncertainty. That creates risk aversion in both employers and employees. That freezes job mobility, which ultimately leads to career stagnation for, well, pretty much everyone. The whole system is just holding its breath.
Okay, now we need to pivot to what might be the most critical detail in this entire investigation. That unemployment anomaly we started with, it's not a universal story. It's a story specifically about men.
This data from before the pandemic is really revealing. For men, the unemployment gap between having a degree and not having one was just a single percentage point. But for women, it was 3 points, a much, much bigger advantage for having a degree. Now that gap has narrowed a bit recently, but it hasn't disappeared like it has for men.
So what explains this divergence? Well, for decades, there have been these really successful initiatives to move women into high-paying, male-dominated fields like STEM and business. And that's increased the talent pool and, frankly, the competition for men. Meanwhile, similar programs to get men into female-dominated fields like nursing and teaching, they just haven't been as successful, held back by cultural stigma and, of course, historically lower pay. And this leads to another strange paradox. When those male-dominated industries like tech start to shrink, women are disproportionately affected. Get this, in the recent tech layoffs, women made up only 28% of the workforce, but they accounted for a staggering 44% of the job losses. Now, there are 3 potential explanations for this disparity. First, there's gender segregation by department.
women are often concentrated in roles like HR and marketing, which are usually the first on the chopping block. Second, you can't ignore lingering cultural biases about who the primary breadwinner is supposed to be. And third, some suggest that as companies shift from diversity-focused hiring to performance-based layoffs, people hired under those earlier initiatives might be more vulnerable. These are really complex issues, and there are no simple answers.
And all of this brings us to the final act of our investigation. When we connect all these clues, the disappearing male graduate advantage, the job-hugging freeze, the great gender divergence, we arrive at a really surprising strategic insight.
The concept is called the glass elevator, and it was first described way back in 1992, but it has never been more relevant than it is right now.
The way it works is actually pretty simple. Men who enter professions that are dominated by women, like nursing or teaching, often find it's easier to get hired and, crucially, easier to get promoted. It's like a glass elevator that just carries them upward. So while the starting salaries might be lower than in a field like tech, their increased chance of moving up the ladder can actually lead to higher earnings over their entire lifetime. This presents us with a really stark choice between two completely different career paths. On one side, you have the high-risk, high-reward, boom and bust fields, where getting ahead is often very political. And on the other, you have these stable professions with lower initial pay, sure, but also way lower risk, and where promotions are tied more directly to your actual performance. Which leaves us with a final, and I think pretty provocative question. In a job market that actively penalizes taking risks, is the most radical career move you can make, defying cultural expectations to chase stability, actually the safest, and maybe even the smartest move of all?